I chose to look at cooperative learning and how it increases student achievement for my research project. The first thing I wanted to do was figure out what cooperative learning is and what it is not. Many teachers feel that when they put their students in groups, they automatically have cooperative learning. However, cooperative learning is not just putting students into groups. There has to be more involved to have true cooperative learning. According to an article in the journal Mathematics Teacher, contrary to common belief, forming groups in the classroom is not sufficient to create a genuine cooperative learning setting. So by just putting students in groups, we didn't create cooperative learning. We have to figure out what cooperative learning is so we can actually meet that criteria. So what is cooperative learning? The journal Theory into Practice talks about cooperative learning and middle schools. And the author defines cooperative learning as a way of organizing instruction that involves students working together to help one another learn. So here we have a little more information. Now we're not just putting students in groups, they have to be helping each other learn. And Rosa Lycan in Mathematics Teacher gives us 4 conditions that must be met in order to have true cooperative learning. Those 4 necessary conditions include having 2 to 6 members in a group. The students have to depend on each other. All members have an equal opportunity to interact with each other. And there's individual accountability. So if we don't have those conditions, then we're not meeting the criteria for cooperative learning. So how does grouping play into cooperative learning? If I wanted to set up cooperative learning in my classroom, how do I group my students? So I want to know what's the best way to group students in cooperative learning. In an article on Kagan Online, which is a great resource for cooperative learning, Jeannie Dotson talks about grouping in her article. According to Dotson, heterogeneous grouping of students is essential to the use of cooperative learning structures, and the groupings involved consisted of students with varying abilities from mentally impaired to gifted. So she's talking about putting students together that have different levels of ability. And in her article, she specifically talked about, a good structure to keep in mind is to have a high-level student, 2 mid-level students, and a low-level student together in the same group, so they can all kind of work together and all benefit from that in the group. Miguel Kagan adds that when we homogeneously group students by ability, we increase the likelihood of perpetuating or even exaggerating the achievement gap. So if we put all of our low-level students together and all of our high-level students together, all we're doing is creating a bigger gap in the level of achievement. If we mix them together heterogeneously, then we're going to have a better result in achievement, and we're going to be able to hopefully close that achievement gap. According to Rosa Lycan, heterogeneity of a small group is one of the most important issues when planning a cooperative learning setting. So as teachers, we really need to make sure we're paying attention to the different ability levels in our class, and we're really trying to mix those abilities when we plan our cooperative learning groups so we can have the best success. And then Lycan also adds that in general, 4 is the optimal number of members in a cooperative group. So one of the necessary conditions was to have 2 to 6 members in a group. Lycan kind of adds on that we really should try to get 4. That would be the best number, but as long as we don't exceed 7, our cooperative learning group will still work well. So then I wanted to look at how cooperative learning adds to student engagement. According to Kagan, students are in small teams. Each has an important role in the team. So if students each have a role in the team, then you're going to have students more engaged in their learning, as opposed to if students didn't have specific roles, and then they could feel like they don't have to participate. But Kagan also adds that in groups, non-participation is not an option. So by giving everybody that important role, you're trying to guarantee that everybody is going to participate and you won't have any non-participators. One article that I read on Kagan Online focused on random student selection in order to increase student engagement. So in this article, the author, Kathy Keene, notes that random student selection is the process of randomly selecting students to participate. Now, at any time, any student may be selected to participate. All students must remain engaged and cannot opt out of classroom conversation. When I took a training class on cooperative learning in the spring, they talked about randomly selecting students, but for presenting what the group came up with. And what we did for that is we would roll a die, and each student in the group would have a number, and whatever number came up on the die would be the number of the person who was going to present. So students wouldn't know ahead of time, and so they'd have to all be participating, all be on task, and know what they would say so they could present. And this would go along with the random student selection. And this is a great way to keep students engaged, because they have to know that they have to be prepared to present, because they don't know if they'll be chosen or not. And then Kagan further goes on to tell us that the more we can engage all of our students, the more all of our students will learn. And this reminds me a lot of the visual that we read on page 80 in the text, where we were talking about if we just teach students something and we just talk, they're not really learning it so much as if they actually are active participants in their learning. So if they're constructing their own meaning, if they're engaged in the task, they're going to learn a lot more than if I'm just up there talking to them and trying to teach them something. So now that we have some information on what cooperative learning is, about how students are engaged in cooperative learning and how we're grouping them, then I wanted to know, well, how can cooperative learning increase student achievement? So according to Robert Slavin, who wrote an article on educational leadership, our research is going to indicate that two factors are needed to increase achievement. These two conditions are essential if the achievement effects of cooperative learning are to be realized. First, the cooperating groups must have a group goal that is important to them. And there must be an individual accountability as well as group accountability. So I found that this was something that was in different research articles, that they all kind of talked about a group goal and individual accountability. And back when I was defining cooperative learning, one of the necessary conditions was individual accountability. And I also had one of my other sources mentioned that the factors contributing to achievement effects of cooperative learning are group goals and individual accountability. Both of these sources agree that those are the two main things to have. So I wanted to know, why does that increase achievement? Well, Slavin in his article really talked about what he thought the group goals contributed to achievement. And he said that group goals are necessary to motivate students to help one another learn. They give students a stake in one another's success. When students have a stake in their learning and in each other's learning, they're more motivated to learn, and it's going to end up increasing achievement. He also says that group goals may help students overcome their reluctance to ask for help or provide help to one another. So sometimes when we're afraid to ask for help, it helps to have some kind of overriding group goal that will kind of push you to get out of your comfort zone and be willing to ask those questions. And then, of course, individual accountability requires all students to participate. So that's going to help increase achievement because everybody's doing something and everybody's engaged in the task. So why does this work well for middle school? So Dodson explains that the developmental characteristics of middle school students make cooperative learning a good fit of teaching strategy for the needs of the students. Because of where the students are developmentally at that point in their life, working together in groups works really well for them. It's a great strategy for them to learn to work together as a team, to have that individual accountability, and they get the social aspect. Because Dodson further goes on to say that cooperative learning enhances social interaction, which is essential to meet the needs of at-risk students. Middle school students are social creatures. They need to socialize. Having them work together in groups gets them socializing, not just with their friends, but with people they may not otherwise talk to and connect with. So it's a great opportunity to get students working together. So for me, looking at this research, I wanted to know, how will I use this in my class and my teaching? And I now have a better understanding that to have true cooperative learning, I really need to make sure there are group goals and individual accountability. That's what's going to increase the achievement in my class. I also have a better understanding of how to group my students for cooperative learning. I need to group them heterogeneously with one high-level student, two mid-level students, and one low-level student in each group, as much as possible. I know that I should try to aim for 4 members in my group, because that seems to be the optimal number, and I should have no more than 7 in a group. I want to try to use the random selection for students to present in order to increase the on-task behavior and increase the engagement. And I'm going to use cooperative learning regularly so my students will get used to it and it can increase the achievement of all my students. And then these are the references that I used for my presentation.